May 27, 1942. Dawn creeps over the vast Pacific, painting the waves in soft shades of gold and blue. On board the USS Enterprise, the hum of engines is a quiet counterpoint to the anxious energy in Admiral Chester W. Nimitz's command post. Maps litter the tables, inked with grids, fleet positions, and the faint scroll of potential enemy movements. Radios crackle with static, each blip a fragment of the unseen enemy. Nimitz stands silently, eyes tracing the lines of his strategy, absorbing the stillness before action. Around him, officers shuffle reports, whispering in hushed tones. Somewhere deep within the Naval Intelligence offices at Pearl Harbor, cryptographers hold their breath, fingers poised over code sheets, translating fragments of Japanese messages that could decide life or death across thousands of miles. The ocean outside is calm, almost indifferent to the storm of decisions unfolding aboard the ship. But within these walls, a revelation is stirring. For Nimitz, a single realization has taken root. The United States can now rid the enemy's every secret. A quiet confidence replaces anxiety. Every move the Japanese make, every plan they craft, can be known, predicted, countered. The scales of war are shifting, and no one outside this room has any inkling. This moment, small and silent, will ripple across the Pacific, changing the course of history. By May 1942, the Pacific War had reached a precarious stalemate. 6 months had passed since the attack on Pearl Harbor, a morning of thunderous explosions that had stunned the United States and left much of its Pacific fleet crippled. Battleships lay overturned in the harbor, aircraft burned on the tarmac, and thousands of sailors were dead or wounded. In those dark days, the Japanese Imperial Navy appeared unstoppable. Their plan was precise, audacious, and ruthless: sweep across Southeast Asia and the Pacific, seize territory, and establish a defensive perimeter no enemy could breach. Yet beneath the surface of despair, cracks were forming in Japan's invincibility. The United States, though shaken, was mobilizing with a quiet determination. Aircraft carriers, largely spared at Pearl Harbor, became the backbone of a naval force that would define the future of the war. Meanwhile, behind closed doors, a group of men and women waged a different kind of battle, one of intellect and patience. At Station HYPO in Pearl Harbor, cryptographers, linguists, and mathematicians labored to decipher Japanese naval communications encrypted in the JN-25 code. Each day, they sifted through a flood of messages, looking for patterns, repetitions, and subtle clues that could reveal the enemy's intentions. The stakes were monumental. Japanese plans for a decisive strike at Midway, a remote cluster of islands north of Hawaii, were shrouded in secrecy. If Japan succeeded, the United States would face a catastrophic blow to its Pacific operations, potentially losing not only territory but the morale of an entire nation. Admiral Nimitz, newly appointed Commander-in-Chief of the Pacific Fleet, understood the enormity of the task before him. Resources were stretched thin. Personnel had to be trained on the fly, supply lines were long, and intelligence was fragmented. Every decision carried the weight of potential disaster. Earlier that May, the Battle of the Coral Sea had offered a glimpse of hope. For the first time, American and Australian forces confronted the Japanese in a carrier-to-carrier engagement. Though tactically inconclusive, it was strategically significant. Japan's southward expansion had been checked, and the U.S. Navy had learned valuable lessons about carrier operations. The Coral Sea had also revealed a crucial truth: information could be as deadly as firepower. Knowledge of enemy movements allowed the Allies to anticipate attacks and respond with precision. The intelligence effort at Station HYPO was relentless. Codebreakers such as Joseph Rochefort, a sharp-eyed naval officer with an instinct for patterns, led the effort. Using intercepted transmissions from Japanese radio networks, they gradually pieced together the structure of JN-25. It was painstaking work. Each message was a tangle of ciphers, false leads, and deliberate misdirection. Mistakes could be fatal, but patience, meticulous attention to detail, and the innovative application of linguistic and mathematical analysis began to bear fruit. By mid-May, The team had achieved partial decrypts that hinted at the target of the next Japanese offensive, an island code named ARF in Japanese communications. The challenge was translating fragments of intercepted messages into actionable strategy. It was not enough to know that the Japanese were moving. Nimitz needed to understand their timing, their force composition, and their objectives. Using the decrypted clues, Nimitz and his intelligence staff began to construct a detailed picture of the Japanese plan. They cross-referenced reconnaissance reports, aerial photographs, and naval logs. Slowly, a pattern emerged. The mystery of ARF pointed decisively toward Midway. This knowledge gave Nimitz a strategic advantage, unlike anything the U.S. had previously enjoyed: the ability to anticipate enemy movements, position his fleet optimally, and prepare for battle on terms dictated not by chance but by information. The psychological dimension of this intelligence breakthrough cannot be overstated. In a war dominated by firepower and maneuver, knowing the enemy's intentions was a profound shift in the balance of power. Nimitz faced the pressure of acting on this knowledge without revealing that the U.S. had broken Japanese codes. Operational security demanded silence. Any misstep could alert the enemy, turning the advantage into catastrophe. Every order, every deployment, was weighed against the risk of exposing the secret while maximizing its strategic impact. By May 27, the pieces were in place. Station HYPO had decrypted enough of the Japanese JN-25 messages to confirm the exact date and location of the planned Midway assault. Nimitz's command post, once a scene of cautious speculation, now brimmed with quiet anticipation. The calm of the Pacific belied the storm to come. Officers moved with purposeful restraint, aware that history was being written not in explosions or gunfire, but in the invisible threads of information connecting codebreakers, strategists, and fleet commanders. This moment was not an isolated triumph, but the culmination of months of intelligence work, careful observation, and strategic foresight. From the chaos of Pearl Harbor to the hard-won lessons of Coral Sea, the United States had emerged with an unprecedented weapon: the ability to see the enemy's plans before they were enacted. On May 27, 1942, Admiral Nimitz could finally grasp the full scope of this power. He knew that the United States could, for the first time in the Pacific War, read every Japanese secret. The stage was set for a confrontation that would alter the course of history. The first angle is human. Admiral Chester W. Nimitz, calm and composed on the surface, carried a weight few could imagine. His officers saw him as steady, almost unflappable, but inside, every decrypted message added both clarity and responsibility. Knowing the enemy's movements before they happened was intoxicating, yet it came with a moral burden. Each decision made with this secret intelligence could result in lives saved or lost. The human tension was compounded by the inability to disclose the advantage. Nimitz could not alert his captains that the Japanese had been decrypted. Doing so would risk the entire operation. Around him, his officers worked in synchronized diligence, aware that every order, every maneuver, could shift the balance between victory and disaster. Meanwhile, the unsung heroes in Station HYPO, mostly young cryptographers, endured sleepless nights over code sheets and cipher grids. Their work was invisible, yet it formed the nervous system of the Pacific Command. The human dimension of May 27 was quiet but palpable. The clash of intellect and intuition, courage, patience, and the heavy weight of responsibility that would define the coming battle. The tactical perspective emphasizes how decrypted intelligence reshaped naval strategy. In traditional naval warfare, battles were won through surprise, speed, and firepower. But now, with JN-25 partially broken, Nimitz could preposition carriers, planes, and submarines with precision. Instead of reacting, he could dictate engagements. This allowed the U.S. to exploit Japanese assumptions and overconfidence. The placement of Task Force 16 with Enterprise and Hornet, and Task Force 17 under Yorktown, was no longer a gamble but a calculated anticipation of enemy moves. Reconnaissance flights were timed to verify intercepted messages, minimizing exposure and maximizing impact. Nimitz could plan ambushes rather than chase shadows. The tactical advantage was not only operational, but psychological. The Americans could force the Japanese into a trap without their knowledge. Every naval maneuver was underpinned by a silent certainty, turning the Pacific Ocean into a theater where intelligence itself became a weapon as lethal as any battleship or bomber. The technological angle highlights the painstaking work behind code-breaking. JN-25 was a complex, layered cipher system designed to conceal Japanese naval operations. Each message involved substitutions, additive codes, and deliberate misdirection. Breaking it required brilliance and methodical persistence. Joseph Rochefort, key cryptanalyst at HYPO, used pattern recognition, linguistic intuition, and statistical analysis to tease out meaning from millions of characters. The team tracked fleet movements, repeated phrases, and coded references to islands and ships. Innovations like traffic analysis, observing when and how messages were sent, revealed organizational hierarchies and operational priorities. The technology was not just machines or radio equipment. It was an intricate system of human intellect and analytical methodology. On May 27, their cumulative effort bore fruit. Nimitz received a level of intelligence unprecedented in naval history. It was a quiet technological triumph, one that turned what had been invisible lines of communication into actionable insight, allowing the U.S. Navy to anticipate and counter Japanese strategy with surgical accuracy. From a leadership perspective, Nimitz's role was central. Intelligence, no matter how advanced, was only as effective as the decisions it informed. Nimitz exemplified calm authority, integrating fragmented information into coherent strategy. He balanced aggressive action with caution, preserving secrecy while preparing his fleet. His leadership extended to nurturing trust and confidence among subordinates, who understood the gravity of the operation even without knowing the details of the intelligence advantage. Every briefing, order, and fleet movement reflected both his strategic acumen and his moral restraint. By May 27, Nimitz had orchestrated a delicate symphony of command, combining human judgment, technological insight, and tactical innovation. Leadership here was less about issuing commands and more about harmonizing countless moving parts, ensuring that every element of the Pacific Fleet operated in unison toward a decisive confrontation. His ability to translate cryptographic breakthroughs into actionable naval strategy was a defining factor in the U.S. Navy's eventual success at Midway. Finally, the enemy and moral perspective underscores Japanese overconfidence and operational blind spots. Japanese planners, buoyed by earlier victories across Southeast Asia and the Pacific, underestimated American intelligence capabilities. Their communications, rich in detail yet predictable in structure, were intercepted without their knowledge. Overconfidence masked operational weaknesses, such as limited reconnaissance and inflexible fleet deployment. On the moral side, the intelligence break, through raised profound questions, the power to predict enemy actions, to know the intentions and movements of others, changed the nature of combat. May 27 marked a moment where knowledge itself became a weapon, where understanding the human and organizational psychology of the adversary could substitute for firepower. For the Japanese, the unseen threat was fatal. For the Americans, it was an ethical tightrope, balancing the use of knowledge against the costs of war. The silent, invisible advantage would set the stage for one of the most consequential battles in naval history, where the enemy's own secrets determined their fate. These 5 perspectives converge into a singular truth. By May 27, 1942, the United States had transformed intelligence into a decisive tool, and Nimitz held the key. Every human effort, technological innovation, tactical decision, and moral consideration now funneled toward a single goal, anticipating and defeating the Japanese at Midway. The stage was set for the decisive moment when preparation and opportunity would intersect. The decisive moment arrived quietly, almost imperceptibly, in the early hours following May 27, 1942. At Pearl Harbor and aboard the aircraft carriers dispersed across the Pacific, Admiral Nimitz's fleet moved like clockwork. Every deployment, every squadron launch, had been calculated from decrypted Japanese messages. Task Force 16, under Rear Admiral Raymond Spruance, and Task Force 17, under Rear Admiral Frank Jack Fletcher, were in position. The American carriers, Enterprise, Hornet, and Yorktown, hovered on the edges of the vast ocean, invisible yet ready to strike. Nimitz, standing over maps and intercepted dispatches, understood that the next few hours would determine the course of the Pacific War. Japanese intelligence, unaware of the breach in GN-25, reported confidently to Tokyo that their movements remained secret. Their strike force, commanded by Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, advanced toward Midway with an air of inevitability. Carriers Akogi, Koga, Soryu, and Haryu carried over 250 aircraft, poised to annihilate the small garrison at Midway. Every vessel, every torpedo, every fighter was accounted for in the calculations at Pearl Harbor. On the morning of June 4, timed precisely from intelligence, American reconnaissance planes spotted Japanese vessels far earlier than anticipated. The cryptographers' work had transformed raw data into anticipation. Pilots scrambled from flight decks, engines roaring as dive. Bombers and torpedo planes launched toward the enemy. The first attacks struck with lethal precision. Akogi and Koga were set ablaze, Soryu crippled. The Japanese carriers, expecting surprise, were stunned to find their movements anticipated at every turn. Nimitz's calculated patience had allowed the U.S. fleet to achieve the ultimate tactical advantage, striking first, with overwhelming intelligence on the enemy's disposition. The battle unfolded as a series of rapid, intense exchanges. Japanese aircraft swept over Midway, met by anti-aircraft fire and American interceptors. Then, from the carriers themselves, waves of bombers descended upon the concentrated Japanese fleet. By late morning, flames engulfed decks, smoke rose in thick columns, and the tide of battle shifted irreversibly. The Americans had struck decisively, guided by knowledge that no Japanese planner could have foreseen. Yorktown, despite damage, launched repeated sorties to maintain pressure, while Enterprise and Hornet executed maneuvers that maximized offensive output while minimizing risk. Every movement reflected the intelligence Nimitz had secured, the Japanese positions, the timing of their strikes, the sequence of their attacks. The psychological dimension was as stark as the physical destruction. Japanese admirals, confident in their secrecy, could not understand how their carefully orchestrated offensive had been preempted. Confusion spread through the command, decisions were delayed, and communication faltered. Nimitz, in contrast, remained composed, issuing orders with calm authority, orchestrating a symphony of war informed by insight rather than guesswork. By the afternoon, the last Japanese carrier, Haryu, was hit and burning, leaving the Imperial Navy without its principal offensive vessels. In a few hours, what had seemed inevitable, a Japanese victory at Midway, was transformed into a catastrophic defeat. Throughout the battle, the work of Station HYPO remained invisible but decisive. Each codebreaker's insight, each decrypted message, had informed Nimitz's anticipation of Japanese moves. From the timing of attacks to the positioning of reconnaissance flights, intelligence dictated the rhythm of the engagement. What unfolded on the sea was the culmination of months of quiet, methodical labor. The clash of fleets was guided by the invisible hand of code-breaking, transforming raw information into strategic action. By dusk, the battlefield was clear. 4 Japanese carriers destroyed, hundreds of aircraft lost, and a decisive psychological edge gained. Nimitz's gamble on intelligence had succeeded beyond expectation. The Americans had turned anticipation into execution, surprise into precision, and knowledge into victory. For the first time, the United States had proven that reading the enemy's secrets could directly shape the outcome of a major naval battle. The calm of the evening Pacific masked the destruction below, but for Nimitz and his officers the implications were immediate and profound. The balance of power in the Pacific had shifted irreversibly. May 27 had been the quiet beginning of this turning point, the moment Nimitz fully realized the strategic power of decrypted Japanese communications. By June 4, that insight had been transformed into action, decisively altering the course of the Pacific War. Yet the consequences extended far beyond ships sunk or aircraft destroyed. The victory at Midway redefined confidence, strategy, and morale on both sides of the conflict, setting the stage for the broader struggle across the Pacific and the ultimate reckoning with Japanese ambition. The aftermath of the Midway engagement was immediate, profound, and far-reaching. In the span of just a few days, the Imperial Japanese Navy had lost 4 of its most powerful carriers, Akogi, Koga, Soryu, and Haryu, along with over 250 aircraft and hundreds of experienced aircrew. The blow was catastrophic, stripping Japan of both offensive capacity and seasoned personnel who could not be quickly replaced. For the United States, the damage to Yorktown and aircraft losses were significant, yet the psychological and strategic victory eclipsed material costs. The battle had demonstrated that careful planning, combined with precise intelligence, could overcome seemingly superior forces. Admiral Nimitz understood the implications immediately. His gamble on intelligence had paid off beyond expectation. By anticipating Japanese moves, he had not only protected Midway Island, but had inflicted damage that would force Japan into defensive recalibration across the Pacific. Naval historians later described the battle as a turning point. From this moment, the United States seized the initiative, moving from a posture of reaction to one of calculated offense. Strategically, Midway halted Japanese expansion and marked the beginning of a steady attritional campaign in which American industrial capacity, coupled with intelligence and tactical innovation, could systematically reduce Japanese dominance. The human toll was stark. Over 3,000 Japanese sailors and airmen perished in the engagement, many trapped in the burning decks of their carriers. American forces suffered roughly 307 killed with hundreds more wounded. Beyond these numbers lay the intangible effects. Morale surged for the U.S. Navy, emboldened by proof that Japan was neither invincible nor omniscient. Sailors, pilots, and support personnel recognized the profound value of intelligence, code-breaking, and disciplined leadership. In letters and memoirs, many recalled the quiet intensity of those days, the tension of anticipation, and the exhilaration of knowing that months of unseen work had translated directly into victory. From a strategic standpoint, the battle forced a dramatic Japanese reassessment. Admiral Yamamoto, once supremely confident, faced a fleet weakened beyond immediate repair. Planned offensives across the Pacific were delayed or cancelled, and the loss of carriers meant a diminished ability to project air power over contested territories. The Japanese command, previously operating with an assumption of operational secrecy, now had to contend with the possibility that their communications were compromised. Reports from the Imperial Navy emphasized caution in subsequent operations, a stark contrast to the aggressive confidence that had carried them through the early months of 1942. Meanwhile, American intelligence networks received a quiet but significant validation. Station HYPO's efforts, led by Joseph Rochefort, Joseph Finnegan, and other cryptographers, were acknowledged in operational debriefings. Their meticulous work in decrypting JN-25 messages had directly informed Nimitz's decisions, demonstrating the lethal efficiency of intelligence when fused with decisive leadership. Historians note that this victory at Midway was one of the first modern examples in which signals intelligence alone created a strategic advantage of enormous magnitude. The consequences went beyond the battle itself. The recognition of codebreaking's power influenced subsequent operations, including the Guadalcanal campaign and beyond, embedding intelligence as a core component of U.S. naval doctrine. Psychologically, the aftermath reverberated through both sides. Nimitz's calm authority and measured decisiveness became legendary, and his ability to translate knowledge into victory cemented his reputation as a strategic visionary. For the Japanese, the sudden and unexplained destruction of key carriers introduced uncertainty and doubt into planning, a psychological crack that would persist through subsequent engagements. The moral dimension of intelligence use also became evident. American commanders, armed with knowledge of the enemy's intentions, could act with precision but bore the ethical responsibility for lives lost in decisions informed by secret insight. The quiet tension between tactical advantage and moral responsibility would remain a defining feature of the conflict. By the end of June 1942, the Pacific theater had shifted irreversibly. The Japanese advance was checked, and American forces, once on the defensive, could begin to shape the momentum of the war. Midway demonstrated that intelligence, technology, leadership, and human ingenuity could combine to produce victory against superior numbers. Nimitz's realization on May 27 that the United States could read Japanese secrets had moved from potential to decisive action, resulting in a triumph that reshaped strategy, morale, and the psychological landscape of the Pacific War. The aftermath of May 27 and the subsequent battle at Midway highlighted the interconnected nature of modern warfare. Information, human skill, and leadership could converge to overturn numerical and material superiority. The Pacific Ocean, once the stage of Japanese confidence and unchallenged expansion, now became a theater in which American foresight, secrecy, and decisive action dictated the terms of engagement. Nimitz's calm assessment, informed by decrypted intelligence, had not only averted disaster but created an opportunity to seize the strategic initiative, a ripple that would carry through the remainder of the war. The stage was now set for reflection on what this meant for warfare, humanity, and history itself. The interplay of intellect, technology, and leadership in shaping outcomes would resonate far beyond Midway, defining the future of naval strategy and demonstrating that knowledge could be the most powerful weapon of all. The aftermath naturally leads to a calm, reflective, philosophical conclusion on the meaning and implications of Nimitz's intelligence triumph. May 27, 1942, stands as a quiet yet monumental pivot in the history of warfare. On the surface, it was simply a day in the vast expanse of the Pacific, marked by sunlit waves and the hum of naval operations. Beneath it, however, was the birth of a new paradigm, intelligence as a decisive weapon. Admiral Nimitz's calm realization that the United States could raid Japanese secret transformed the conduct of war. It was a moment where human ingenuity, disciplined leadership, and analytical rigor converged to alter the fate of thousands, shaping strategy and history itself. The triumph at Midway that followed was not solely a story of ships, planes, or firepower. It was a story of patience, observation, and quiet intellect. The cryptographers at Station HYPO, often anonymous and unseen, had labored in shadow, piecing together fragments of enemy communication to reveal a path to victory. Their achievement underscores a profound truth. The outcomes of war are as much determined by insight as by bullets and bombs. Knowledge, painstakingly gathered and carefully applied, had become a force multiplier. There is a human dimension to this reflection that cannot be overlooked. Nimitz bore the moral weight of foreknowledge, issuing orders that would send men into harm's way while keeping the secret of his advantage. The balance of leadership and responsibility, of using knowledge without recklessness, defined the ethical landscape of modern conflict. On the other side, the Japanese, confident and unaware, became victims of their own assumptions, highlighting the fragile boundary between overconfidence and catastrophe in warfare. Technologically, May 27 illuminates the emerging role of information in shaping outcomes. Signals intelligence, cryptanalysis, and the systematic study of patterns had introduced a new form of warfare, one in which the invisible threads of communication could dictate the flow of battles. This was not magic or luck. It was the meticulous application of intellect, process, and collaboration under immense pressure. For future conflicts, the lesson would endure. mastery of information could redefine power. Ultimately, the day exemplifies the interplay between human courage and unseen forces. The calm seas of May 27 concealed the storm of thought, anticipation, and calculation that would determine the Pacific's fate. Nimitz's insight, rooted in patience and understanding, reminds us that history often turns on quiet revelations rather than grand gestures. The victory at Midway and the realization that intelligence could rewrite the rules of engagement left an enduring legacy. In the theater of war, knowledge can illuminate the path to survival, victory, and moral clarity. As the Pacific stretches endlessly, reflecting the sun's fading light, one can imagine the silent work continuing in rooms far from battle. Messages intercepted, codes deciphered, strategies formed. These invisible currents shaped the very nature of modern conflict. May 27, 1942 was more than a date. It was the moment when intellect and foresight transformed warfare, showing that even in the chaos of global conflict, human insight remains the most decisive weapon of all.